How many times have you heard a no that seemed to seal your fate? Bankrupt. Alone. Ignored by 12 publishers. But he decided that Harry Potter would be born, with or without the world's permission. It was as if each no had carved an invisible scar into her. 12 times rejected. 12 times pushed out of her own dreams. Each denial felt like more than a refusal. It was a cruel reminder that to the world she simply wasn't good enough. Doubt grew like a shadow within her, whispering at every thought, "You weren't born for this." She had already stopped counting how many nights she woke up scared, feeling like her entire life was collapsing without making a sound. I carried the weight of having a young daughter in my arms and in my chest, the paralyzing fear of not being able to provide her with even the basics. Bills piled up. The food was missing. But nothing hurt more than that feeling that she was a fool for continuing to believe in a story that only she could see. Shame became your second skin. Silent. Gift. A constant reminder that, to everyone around her, she had already failed. Success seemed like a forbidden place. A territory she would never be invited to enter. She compared her life with that of others, and all she saw was an abyss between her and what they called happiness. Friends moving on. Acquaintances being applauded. And her? Stagnated. Invisible. There were times when I thought about giving up. Leave that childhood dream behind, accept the harsh reality without magic. To be another piece in the gray world. Another one who left what she loved to survive. Another dropout. But every time she came close to letting go of everything, something pulled her back. It wasn't pride. It wasn't stubbornness. It was love. An irrational, ungovernable, non-negotiable love for the story that had not yet been born. Fear screamed inside her many times, "You are not enough." And sometimes she believed it. But in her darkest moments, even without applause, even without support, even without a sign of victory, she whispered to herself, "I won't give up." Not because he was strong. Not because she was brave. But because, within his own ruin, there was still something that deserved to be born. Maybe you felt this too. This silent struggle between giving up or resisting. This weight of feeling invisible, useless, irrelevant. While something inside you begs for one more chance. If you've already experienced this invisible battle, this video is yours. Right here in the comments. I've also heard a no that almost made me give up. Let's show that no one fights alone. And if this story has touched any wound or hope within you, leave a like now. This helps spread this message to those who also need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories that could rekindle what the world tried to erase in you. The most intense part of this journey has yet to begin, so it will last until the end. J.K. Rowling wrote in coffee shops, without money to heat her own house. He created magical worlds while fighting his own mind, trying to hold on to something that still made sense. Each page she filled was a silent challenge against the depression that dragged her down like an invisible current. Every rejection letter was more than a no. It was a direct attack on his existence. That's not good enough. There's no market for that. We're not interested. The words danced before her, cruel, cold, as if they were hammers hitting the same spot until they broke. And it broke. A little more every day. I left coffee shops looking at the floor as if apologizing for taking up space. He returned home carrying in his pockets only the change for the cheap coffee, and on his chest, the shame of someone who dared to dream too big. The cold went through the walls, through the clothes, through the soul. He tried to smile at his little daughter, but the smile seemed borrowed, forced, too fragile to hide his fear. The fear of never leaving there. The fear that all she had to offer was nothing. The fear that her story, the one she believed to be magical, was in fact pathetic. There was no heat. There was no support. There were no signs. Just a silent struggle to keep breathing while life told me to give up. With each new day, the questions came like low blows. What are you doing with your life? When will you accept reality? Why do you insist on this? She had no answers. I just had the instinct to continue, even without meaning, even without clear hope. Sometimes the urge was to drop everything. Throw the papers in the trash, disappear in the middle of the gray city, let time erase your name as if it had never existed. But she came back. He always came back. Returned to the blank sheet. I went back to the characters that no one knew. She returned to that small thread of light that resisted inside her, even dirty with tiredness, fear, and doubt. It was humiliating. Having to ask for help to buy food. Having to pretend to be strong when everything inside screamed weakness. It was humiliating to see acquaintances building stable careers, receiving promotions, while she was just the woman who wrote childish nonsense in an old notebook. It was humiliating to know that, to the world, she was just another stubborn failure. That the story she carried like a treasure was seen as dead weight. Rejection piled up like a pile of stones in his chest. Every publisher who said no seemed to cross their name off an invisible list of people who could still win. She saw the list getting smaller. He saw his chances slip through his fingers. I saw faith disappear slowly, like smoke in a cold wind. It wasn't just professional failure. It was the feeling of failing as a mother. Failing as a woman. Failing as a human being. I carried such heavy guilt that sometimes it was difficult to even get out of bed. He felt selfish for still wanting to write. She felt ridiculous for believing that this could change anything. She felt crushed by the distance between what she dreamed of being and what she actually was. Some nights, she cried in silence so her daughter wouldn't hear. The crying wasn't just sadness. It was despair. It was the muffled sound of someone who has tried everything and still keeps falling. It was the surrender that never really arrived, but that hovered around, threatening to take everything once and for all. It was the shame of not being able to do it. It was the fear of wasting your life on something that would never happen. It was the impotence of depending on the compassion of strangers, of living in fear of the next month, the next bill, the next no. And yet, in the midst of this emptiness, something still whispered. Something she herself could barely hear. Something small, hidden among the rubble. But the world didn't know that. The world only saw a broken, lost, stubborn woman. Someone easy to ignore. Someone who should have given up by now. And perhaps, deep down, she herself began to believe that this was her destiny. Maybe all that was left was to accept oblivion. Accepting that it is just another story that has never been told. But that day, after the umpteenth rejection, something different happened. It wasn't a scream. It was not a burst of courage. It was almost an internal whisper. She looked at the pile of crumpled papers. For the rejection letters thrown on the table. For the manuscript that no one wanted to read. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel angry. He didn't feel ashamed. He didn't feel afraid. He felt clarity. The story was there. He was still breathing. It still pulsed. Even if the world didn't see it. Even if no one else believed it. She took the notebook with shaking hands. The words were all blurred, scribbled, incomplete. But for her, it was perfect. Because it wasn't about pleasing publishers. It wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about being accepted. It was about the story. About what she carried inside her. And that he needed to live. Without thinking much, he pulled out a clean sheet. He wrote, in hesitant, almost childish handwriting, "Harry will live. Even if it's just for me." It was simple. It was invisible. It was definitive. In that sheet, in that gesture, she rebuilt herself. He decided he didn't need the world's permission to create. I didn't need to be told I was good enough. I didn't need approval to continue. She would be the guardian of her own history. Even alone. Even invisible. Even in failure. While the world only saw a broken and lost woman, something immense was born inside her. A silent commitment. A new identity. No longer the rejected one. No longer the failure. But the creator. The mother of something that no one yet knew, but that was already too real to be erased. It was the smallest and, at the same time, the most powerful decision of his life. Nobody applauded. Nobody saw it. Nobody understood. But she knew. She knew that from now on, whatever happened, she wouldn't give up. It didn't matter how many no's still came. It didn't matter how many doors were closed. It didn't matter how many times she was ignored. Harry Potter was going to live. Even if it was just the pages stored in an old drawer. It was at that moment that something changed forever. Not in the world. Not in visible reality. But in the most important place of all, inside her. It was a new voice. A new force. A new faith. No longer based on acceptance. But rooted in the silent certainty that what was true needed to exist. And it was enough. For once it was enough. Even if no one knew. Even if no one applauded. Even if she had to walk alone for a long time. It was there, on that simple sheet, that everything that the world would one day see and applaud began. But now, at this very moment, it was just her. She and her promise. She and her invisible world. She is the story that, against everything, would decide to be born. If that small, silent decision is stirring something inside you, if you've ever felt like you needed to keep going even when the whole world said no, then this channel is for you. Sign up now because the next stories will ignite your invisible faith even more. And don't forget to leave your like so that this message reaches those who also need to remember that it is still possible. The journey is just beginning. It was a small publisher. Almost without structure. No big promises. No guarantees. But in that shy yes there was something different. There was the first crack in the wall of rejection that seemed insurmountable. It was a modest, almost symbolic contract. But for her, it was silent proof that persisting had paid off. The book was published. No fuss, no big campaigns. Just simple words printed on pages that carried the weight of everything she had silently endured. And then, it happened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. One reader recommended it to another. A child was enchanted and asked his mother to buy the next volume. A teacher read a passage to the class and saw eyes light up. Harry Potter began to come to life. Not just in her imagination, but in the hearts of millions of people. The reviews, which had previously been negative or indifferent, began to change their tone. The words that used to hurt her were now replaced by emotional praise. The story that no one wanted to publish became a phenomenon. Sales exploded. Bookstores, previously reluctant, began lining up to have their books. The publishing market, which had ignored her for so long, now fought for each new manuscript of hers as if it were gold. The boy who lived. The woman who didn't give up. The shelves, once empty, now displayed his name prominently. Newsstands were talking about her. The prizes started to arrive. Film adaptations transformed Harry's world into a planetary cultural reference. And with each achievement, came the silent memory of that day when everything seemed lost. From that moment when, alone, without applause, she decided to continue. The world recognized her as one of the most read and admired authors in history. More than 500 million books sold. Translated into dozens of languages. Millions of children, teenagers, and adults rediscovering their passion for reading through their creation. And, in the midst of the fame, the wealth, the applause, she never forgot. He never forgot that it all started when no one saw it. When all she had was a sheet of paper, a silent promise, and an invisible faith. Rowling, years later, would sum it all up in a sentence that carried the weight of her path. The rock at the bottom became the foundation on which I rebuilt my life. Every no received, every humiliation, every tear swallowed, every silent doubt, now had a new meaning. They weren't proof that she wasn't enough. They were the invisible forge where his resolve grew stronger. What seemed like the end was actually the beginning. What seemed like failure was foundation. What seemed like silence was seed. Nothing seen today, the books, the films, the success, the worldwide admiration, would have existed without that small, silent decision she made alone, at a time that the entire world ignored. And perhaps this is the biggest lesson for those who are still fighting in the shadows. For those who feel like they are screaming into a void. For those who almost believe that their dreams are not worth living. The visible result is just the tip of the story. What really changes everything starts when no one is watching. Now I need to ask you, how many of your ideas have been stored at the bottom of a drawer because someone told you they weren't good enough? How many dreams have you put aside because the world made it seem like it wasn't worth it? How many times have you looked inside yourself and wondered if you were wasting time, wasting life, insisting on something that no one seemed to see? Maybe you've already written your story and thrown it away. Maybe you started a song, an art piece, a project, and stopped halfway because someone laughed, because someone doubted, because no one applauded. Perhaps today you carry in your chest a collection of dreams aborted before they were even born for fear of rejection. But what if I told you that every great story begins precisely in this silence? What if what's missing is not the approval of others but just giving yourself a real chance? An internal sim. Yes, to continue. Yes, to try again. Yes, to believe in what no one can see yet, but that pulses inside you. Have you ever stopped to think about how many incredible things the world lost because someone let the first no stop them? How many works of art have never been painted? How many books have never been written? How many songs have never been sung? How many projects never got off the ground because fear got the better of them? And now, look inside. What is the story that still lives within you, even suffocated by doubt? What is the project, the dream, the creation that, despite everything, still breathes softly inside your chest, asking to be born? You can try to ignore it. You can try to forget. You can try to bury it. But deep down, he knows it won't disappear. Because what is true within us never really dies. It just waits for the moment when we decide to stop asking for permission to exist. Today, looking at everything you've endured, everything you've silently overcome, tells me, have you really come this far to give up now? Were all the falls, all the tears, all the rejections, in vain? Or could it be that each mark you carry is, in fact, the invisible foundation of something much greater, which has yet to be born? How many no's have you heard to date? And how many will you still hear? Does it matter? Does it need to be imported? The decision that changes everything is silent. It's that moment when no one is watching. When the whole world ignores you. When recognition does not come. when doubt screams. And yet, you decide to continue. That's the difference. This is the invisible separation between those who give up and those who transform the impossible into reality. It's not applause that builds great stories. These are choices made in the dark. The small gestures that no one sees. The silent commitment that no one understands. So, I want to invite you to reflect. What is the invisible decision you need to make today? What's the first small step you can take even without applause, even without guarantee, even without an audience? What is the dream that still deserves to be born despite everything? If today's story touched some forgotten or hidden part of you, write in the comments, "My story is not over yet." I want to read it. I want to see who on the other side still believes, even if it's short, even if it's scared, even if it's almost giving up. Your story also deserves to be born. Your invisible world can also become real. And you can start today. Now, in silence. In the most powerful way possible, with your decision. Now, tell me here in the comments, which invisible decision do you feel is already being born within you? Share with us. Sometimes writing is the first step to making real what is still hidden inside. If this story lit something in your heart, leave a like so that it reaches even more people who need to remember the strength they carry in silence. And subscribe to the channel to walk along with us on this journey of stories that transform. In the next episode, you will learn how a young man rejected by his own school team decided, in silence, that no one would forget his name. An invisible turnaround that built the greatest legacy in the history of basketball. I'll wait for you.